Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is teacher Ryan, and today we will talk about local and global communication in multicultural setting. This is our lesson 3 in the purposive communication. Anyway, if you're new here in my channel, don't forget to click to subscribe and hit the notification down for you to be updated on my upcoming videos. So, what is it for me and why do we care about this topic? The two things that you should remember. Number one, determine culturally appropriate terms, expressions, and images that are sensitive to gender, race, class, etc. And number two, adapt cultural awareness and sensitivity in communication of ideas. If you want your communication to be effective, regardless of what situation that is or you are in, we need to understand the context in various manners, especially when we are dealing on cultures having their own ways of life, especially their languages, their personalities, their religions, the way how they live should be considered, should be taken into consideration, because what we see about us may not necessarily the way how they see us. So sometimes in life we get not to understand others because we're looking into our differences that will separate us. But what brings us together is our relationship, because we look into our commonality, and that is where communication becomes successful. And this lesson also will teach you to be considerate and sensitive to other people, because if you will just take this for granted, there will be a tendency that you are imposing your own belief, your dogma to other people, that they should be like this and they should be like that, and that becomes disadvantageous to you, because that would lead to racism, discrimination to other people. All right, so there are five concepts on this lesson. Number one, we have the world of diversity, the global community, cultural awareness and sensitivity, gender sensitivity, and political correctness. So these are the components of the lesson three. All right, let's look at in our global environment. Last lesson two, we talk about globalization, wherein it is a process of interaction and integration among people, place, events, and so on. And this is not just a process of interaction, but it is also motivated by international trading, and even so, driven by information technology. So these are the things that will help us understand globalization through the use of our communication. So because of that, we are already in the environment, the setting. And accordingly, it is still a challenge to have the ability to communicate effectively. It is still a challenge. Why is that so? Because even when both parties speak the same language, there can still be misunderstanding due to ethnic and cultural differences. Even just within our group, we cannot avoid, it is inevitably that we encounter misunderstanding. Why is that so? Because of our differences. In the business sectors, poor communication leads to poor organizational performance, especially if the information given by the management is not properly disseminated. It is only given to a particular group of people and others are not aware about it. But there are things that we have to consider. However, that will serve as a failure if the other parties do not know exactly what is going on the information. And because of that, that would lead to poor organizational performance. And in our global market, it is important that to understand the impact of globalization on cross-cultural communication. Remember, in business, we are dealing with people more than money. We build relationship. And this relationship is seen to the people that we encounter. And these people that we encounter come from different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. If we offer products or services that are taboo, that are not based on their social convention, and that will serve as a failure in communication. For example, in our brothers and sisters in Muslim, and if you are not aware on the ingredients that you're using in your product, and then when they see it is not halal, it's haram, so that will serve as a poor communication. You are not putting yourselves in the shoes of other people, so that becomes a failure in communication. And you have to know who your customers are, your people are, in order for you to cater your business. So understand first their culture. Okay? Even so, for example, in this Dunkin' Donut advertisement in Thailand, this depicts this discrimination and even racism. Racism in terms of looking black associated with the product of a Dunkin' Donut. So this will give a wrong connotation on the the image of women or image of black people towards eating black donut. And it is investigated in the article of The Guardian from 2013. So here, the franchise of the Dunkin' Donut in Thailand was asked to apologize on public about this. So here, so though we are selling the product, but if we are not culturally sensitive on the things that we show to the public, and that will become a failure in communication. Okay? We are a society becoming globally connected across cultural boundaries. In order to fulfill the organization's mission and to build value for stakeholders, the businesses must understand how to communicate with employees and customers from different cultures. And lastly, through the use of technology, it can have a profound impact on the individuals, groups, organizations, and institutions. So here, we are not based on our own spectrum. We are looking at other spectrums that will be part on the integration as a unit, as a part of the unity of our society. So our society is not just based on our society because we're looking at a greater tendency of reaching out other people. And we should also understand who they are, where they're coming from, and what they believe in. Okay? Next is we have, okay, in the global environment, according to Genevieve Hilton, cultural proficiency does not need memorizing every cultural nuance. Nuance means a distinction, a little distinction. It's nuance no of every market. It's knowing when to listen, when to ask help, and when to finally speak. It's not enough that we know about culture, reading them, but it's also important. But at the end of the day, it's not about memorizing every feature, every do's and don'ts about them. But the basic rule here in cultural proficiency is you learn how to observe by listening and when to ask help and when finally to speak, especially if you happen to go abroad and if you don't study their culture, so that would lead to culture shock. So instinct will tell us that we need first to listen, observe your surrounding, and approach somebody and ask question and use a language that is common between you, and that is English. And there's a time if that person can share to you, there's a time you will be talking or you will be asking. All right, that's only our introduction. So let's begin with the world of diversity. Okay? So according to Parapac 1995, a world diversity is a world as a world of diversity. So this is quite redundant. But let's look at the illustration on what we mean by this. Okay, long before, for many centuries have passed, we are separated by mountains and seas. We rarely see each other, and our lives are practically unrelated. No technology yet, we are practically unseparated. Unique cultures, way of life, language, religion, tribe, or ethnic group that establish a nation of their own. So we have our own way of life. So since we are separated by seas and mountains, so we have our separate identity. And because of this, since we have separate identities, we have our unique population. This will look into not just our own identity, but our physical, whether you're white or black, you're small, tall, the way what you believe in, that's your spiritual, and your way of life. We have our own way of life. In this world we live in has been a world of diversity. Whether you like it or not, people will come to our life not the same how we believe in. For example, if there is a migration or people coming from our place having different cultures, for example, if you are living in an area full of Christians and there is a group of Muslims, and then if you don't know how to deal with them, know what they are or what they believe in, so there will be a separation between the two of you. But if you learn how to listen to them, understand what they are, and have a friendly, kind, and polite manner how you communicate with them, and does not become a problem. All right, but if you see there is a boundary between the two of you, and that becomes a problem if you see them as different. And not just the Muslims and Christians, and there are other denominations and other cultures that will live in the community. So see, we are living in a world of diversity. But the question here is there a reason to be ashamed or frightened of diversity? I don't think so. There's a reason. But this will serve as a source of strength and enrichment. We are learning from one another. So, the dynamic development of our cultural identities has been influenced by short technology. So, what do you mean by this? This is the instrumental in changing the way we live, the way we communicate, the way we respond to our environment becomes the source of invention and development of new technologies. So see, because we have our own distinct way of living, and because we have this distinct way of living, we can actually come up with tools, processes, methods, and strategies that will boost and sustain our cultural identity. And the things that will help us to make our job easier, we use technology. And because of this technology, this becomes dynamic. And this will serve as, parang this will help us understand more about ourselves, developing our structure. Early days of civilization, basically, we were direct and mainly verbal communication, limited circle of friends, or a circle of influence, dependent on the physical environment, ethnic groups in some underdeveloped countries. If this civilization is preserving and they do not want to assimilate, inculturate, or acculturate, so these are ways, the ways of cultural transmission. When you talk about enculturation, enculturation, this is you will relearn. You have to relearn your culture. For example, if you grew up in a Christian community, though you're Muslim, and the way how you talk, the way how you dress, and then you want your parents are very firm, and then you need to go back and relearn your culture. Acculturation is ACCU. Acculturation is learning other cultures. So the way how you adapt them is what they call acculturation. So these two are what they call assimilation. And we have also preservation. Kasi preservation is they are against whatever beliefs, principles of other people, and if you will mingle with them, that will affect our culture. So that was we call preservation. Okay? Or what we call the severe way is the rejection. And there is a disadvantage when we preserve or we don't allow our culture grow. We don't actually change our culture, we just grow our culture. And it doesn't need to change the way what we are, but only grow what we are. And because of this, development of transportation and communication technologies enlarges the circle of encounters, influence, and interdependence. When we realize that we are not alone in this country, we are excited and even elated to know other countries, what they believe in, their best practices, what they what they know about. So we actually develop certain ways to reach with them. So we have the use of the transportation. For example, Filipinos wanted to go abroad and work there, and with the use of the transportation and the communication technologies like calling other places. We can meet with almost anyone on this planet Earth through transportation, trade, tourism, and telecommunication. So these four will allow us to reach one another from one country to another. So what's the result? This is to have access on global market. In some ways, technology has united the world and mankind. But technology has not eliminated our diversity. But this will actually brings us together. Even in the Philippines, with the modern communications, we actually enhance our competitiveness, modernize and integrate our economy, improve our national efficiency and productivity, strive for equitable distribution, eliminate isolation of remote and rural areas, and attract capital inflow for infrastructural development. In other words, with the use of the modern communications, this will advance our economy. This will disseminate information. What are the things that we need to do, and what are the things that we need to improve? What are the things that we need to improve on? And because of this, there's a proper communication in one sector, government sector, and then we can actually share one another what we know and help the democracy in the Philippines. Then this will be the result. Enhance our competitive, modernize, integrate our economy. Okay? Then we have our second is we have the global community. So we are already citizens of this world. Because since we are citizens of this world, we know exactly that we are part of the nation, right? So, what do you mean by global community? So, it refers to the people or nations of the world considered as being closely connected by modern telecommunications and as being economically, socially, and politically interdependent. So, no man is an island. So, we are living in a global community. And what bridges us is through the use of telecommunication. When we talk one another through phone, to satellite communication. So, for example, these are the major offices and some homes. linked with optical fiber systems. For example, if you have clients away from your country, for example, China or some other countries, especially if you are teaching English as second language to these foreign countries, then you are part of the global community and global multimedia services, especially our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and even Twitter. We are part of the global community and the satellite transmissions such as the radio, TV, and newspaper. All right, next is we have K. Everything begins in a vision and anticipation. This global community has been planned, has been dreamed by somebody, and his name is McLuhan. And McLuhan, for more than 50 years, he anticipated the arrival of the global village where everyone on this planet could feel himself to be citizen of a village. Okay? So because of this McLuhan's vision, he was able to come up with for a while. Where's my PowerPoint? In some ways, McLuhan's dream was realized. And because of this realization of his dream, there is a great impact, and that is the development of the global satellite transmission and broadcasting. And because of this development, it can access the superhighway of information or global network of intelligence. So we have our satellite. We can actually call to our phones, the use of internet. So what are the results of this? We have the globally shared information. We can communicate instantly in just one click of our hand. Then we can work together, develop robust and sustainable economic progress by looking at the best practices of other countries, and promote the voice of the people, democracy suitable for our different societies. And because of this, we have the global high-tech facilities. So we can actually work together as nations. Yes, especially ASEAN integration. We can actually exchange ideas and, of course, nurture friendship. So we are not afraid to deal with other countries because we are actually part of the global community. Next, we have the cultural awareness and sensitivity. Let's define what is cultural awareness. Is knowing that there are multiple different cultures based on religion, ethnicity, nationality, and other factors that have different attitudes and outlooks. So awareness is based on what you know, okay? And when you talk about what is culture sensitivity, is not just about what you know, but looking into those differences without insisting your culture is better or that everyone should do it by your way, according to Sherman 2018. So the culture awareness is understanding our differences by looking at different cultures, understanding, all right, that is who you are, okay, that is your nationality. You know exactly what the rules are, your attitudes and outlooks in life. But the cultural sensitivity is considering that we have our differences and you don't impose them that yours is better than the others. So you are not becoming culturally sensitive. All right? So, what are the things that we need to do about cultural awareness and sensitivity? Number one is we have to view human difference as positive and cause for celebration. It doesn't mean that you're black that will separate us to, through white or white people. It's not about the color of your skin, the color of your hair, how you look, but looking in our commonality. It is just the physical that is different, but the way how we treat other people, despite our differences, that will bring us a positive effect. And because of our diversity, because of our awareness and sensitivity, this would lead to celebrate. Number two is have a clear sense of your own ethnic, cultural, and racial identity. So, if you want to become understanding and not insisting that your culture is better, first is you have to understand your own. Your own is different from others. And it doesn't mean that others are different that will make you less of your culture. So have a clear sense of your own culture. Number three is be aware that in order to learn about others, you need to understand and be prepared to share your own culture. So there's no fear or intimidation when somebody asks you about your culture. Of course, you have to teach them why do women in Islam wear hijab? Why do women submissive to their husbands? Or why do they practice polygamy? So this will give you the understanding about their culture, their tradition, their customs. So, and of course, if somebody will ask you about this, don't feel offended because that is how they ask, right? Number four is be aware of your own discomfort when you encounter differences in race, color, religion, sexual orientation, language, and ethnicity. So you cannot really go away from the fact that there will be people who will say something against you and be ready to feel this discomfort without being disrespectful. So you have to be ready about it. And number five is be aware of the assumptions that you hold about people of cultures different from your own. Be aware of that. And be aware of your stereotypes as they arise and develop personal strategies for reducing the harm that they cause. So these are the guidelines in cultural awareness and sensitivity. So the bottom point of this is you know exactly who you are in your culture and who they are in their culture, and you don't let them see or experience that they are less of their cultures because you see that your culture is more. So when to speak, when to listen, and when to ask questions. Okay? And number seven is be aware of how your cultural perspective influences your judgments about what appropriate, normal, or superior behaviors, values, and communication styles are. So here, number eight, accept that in cross-cultural situations, there can be uncertainty, and that uncertainty can make you anxious. It can also mean that you do not respond quickly and take the time needed to get more information. So do not be reactive. Learn how to pose yourself, compose yourself when somebody will actually ask you that way. And there are things that you're uncertain, just do not respond quickly, but have time to respond. Number nine, take any opportunity to put yourself in places where you learn about differences and create relationships. That's why we have immersion on cultural communication, where you will observe them, the ways of life. Because in order for us to understand others is when we place ourselves in their shoes, observe the way what they are and what they believe in, right? And number 10, understand that you will likely be perceived as a person with power and racial privilege, or the opposite, and that you may not be seen as unbiased or as an ally. So see, so I hope that these guidelines will actually allow you to understand and be sensitive on other cultures. All right? Next is we have the gender sensitivity. when you talk about gender sensitivity, it does not only encompass it does not only encompass gender preferences, but it is the right for all, whether you are a male, a female, or other preferences that you have. But when you talk about gender sensitivity, is giving everyone an equal opportunity to do something. And gender here is not just about homosexuals, the LGBT, but this is all. This is for all. Whether what male, whether you're male or female or other denominations. So let's look at what is gender sensitivity. It refers to the aim of understanding. Number one is you have to understand. This is the goal of the gender sensitivity, be understanding, and look into the consideration of the societal and cultural factors. Involve gender-based inclusion, like men are better than women or women are better than men, and discrimination in the most diverse spheres of public and private life. So we have also what is gender sensitive language. It is the realization of gender equality in written and spoken language. So the way we speak and the way we write, we have to consider the neutrality of the language that will not lead to sexism. You see, sexism is attributing a particular gender on a particular role. Okay? It is attained when women and men and those who do not conform to the binary gender system are made visible and addressed in language as persons of equal value, dignity, integrity, and respect. Especially for the LGBT, they are reforming the use of the third pronoun, they, as singular rather than plural. And is this has been on the process whether that is acceptable in the dictionary. And there are other countries slowly accepting this concept on the use of the third pronoun they as singular rather than plural. We have the general neutral words, okay? So instead of saying forefather, you will say ancestors or forebears. Instead of saying man-made, you will say artificial or manufactured. Instead of saying common man, you say average or ordinary person. Instead of saying chairman, you say chair or chairperson or coordinator. Instead of saying ladylike, you will say courteous or cultured. Instead of saying freshman, you will say first year student. Instead of saying freshman, I mean stewardess, you say flight attendant. Instead of saying manpower, you say human resources. And instead of saying congressman, you would say legislator or representative. Mail carrier, letter carrier, postal worker. So instead of saying mailman, postman, you will say mail carrier, letter carrier, and postal worker. Instead of saying mankind, you say people or human beings. Instead of man, you say person or individual. Instead of saying policeman, you say police officer. Instead of saying brotherhood, you say solidarity. Instead of saying to man is to operate, to cover, or to staff. Why is that so? Because we are living in a patriarchal society where men lead others, men lead women. So because of this, there must be an equality of the use of male and female. So instead of saying policeman, this will give an attribute that police should be only for men. But there are also women who can be police. And this is what they call police officer, right? So we have also in the gender sensitivity in the use of the written or spoken. For example, this quote: "The chef does everything but cook. That's what wives are for." So this becomes a insensitive on the gender role because what this statement tells us that the role of wives are like chef, everything but cook. So this will not be a good idea. Okay? Because wives are not just made to cook as a chef, but everyone can be a chef, not just wives that are made for. And then we have another example of gender insensitivity. John and Mary both have full jobs. He helps her with the household. So this serves as insensitive. It should be John. Both John and Mary have full full-time jobs, and they share household. They help one another, or they help each other in doing household. So do we have the so-called terms? We have the so-called attributes, no? Attributes means the usage of certain words which underline stereotypic gendered attributes. For example, you say engineering, what comes first in your mind? You say, oh, okay, this engineering is actually manned by men or led by males. So basically, this becomes a stereotypic gendered attributes. When say nurse, what we first think female. When you say teachers, female. Soldiers, female. And remember here that we don't see professions are designated to a particular gender. So remember, this will only be leading to stereotyping. Women are caretakers, gentle and emotional, while men are achiever, strong and logical. So when you give distinctions between men and women on their characteristics on the societal role, and that becomes a stereotyping. Both men and women can have these characteristics. Men can be caretakers, gentle and emotional, and women can also be achievers, strong and logical. So we don't give distinctions except for biological roles. So we have this checklist for gender revisions. I want you to listen carefully. Have you used man or men or words containing one of them to refer to people who may be female? For example, um, if you're using men like his, but it is also included for female, then so consider substituting another word like his or her, he or she, if you don't know the exact gender. If you have mentioned someone's gender, was it necessary to do so? If you identify someone as female architect, for example, do you refer to someone else as male architect? And if you then note that the woman is an attractive blonde mother of two, do you mention that the man is muscular, square jaw, father of three? Unless gender and related matters, looks, clothes, parenthood are relevant to your point, leave them unmentioned. Okay, so be neutral. Do you use any occupational stereotypes? Watch the four cues of female pronouns for nurses and male ones for scientists, for example. So instead using them, you say his or her or they. Do you use language that in any way shows lack of respect for either sex? Have you used he, his, or himself to refer to people who may be female? Alright, so it should be he or she, him or her, his or her, himself or herself. Next, we have political correctness. Political correctness, it has nothing to do with politics. Okay? Political means using wisely. Okay? So being wise in terms of correctness. Okay? So let's define what is political correctness. So what is political correctness? Is used to describe language, policies, or measures that are intended to avoid offense or disadvantage to members of particular groups in society. So remember, word is the only weightless thing on earth that makes one feel heavy. So it takes seconds for us to say the words, but a lifetime to keep to the person. So there are many ways not to offend other to make this less offensive. Let's look some examples. Okay? So here, don't say cheating, but say academic dishonesty. Okay? Ugly, you say aesthetically challenged. Because you know what? If you don't follow political correctness, there's a community guideline on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube that are offensive to the viewers or to the netizens. So instead of saying cheating, you say that person committed academic dishonesty. So in other words, that person is cheating. Ugly. So here we are using indirect way of saying ugly. So say aesthetically challenged. Negra or negro, you say black or man of color or a woman of color. Instead of saying bald or cowboy, you say comfy. Disabled, you say differently abled. Drug addict, you say drug dependent. Don't say broken home, you say dysfunctional family. Don't say poor, you say economically marginalized. Don't say old, you say elderly or senior. When you say dishonest, you say ethnically disoriented. And then we have don't say deaf, you say hearing impaired person. Instead of saying squatters, you say informal settlers. We're living in in settlement of informal settlers. We have, instead of saying mental retardation, say intellectual disability or intellectual development disorder. Instead of saying stupid to the person, say intellectually impaired. Instead of saying little people, you say midget. Instead of saying crook, you say morally challenged. Instead of saying body odor, you say non-discretionary fragrance. Non-discretionary fragrance. Instead of saying homeless, you say outdoor urban. Instead of saying fat, you say people of mass. Instead of saying rape victim, you say rape survivor. Instead of saying pervert or bastos, you say sexually dysfunctional. Instead of saying psychopath, you say socially misaligned. Instead of saying you are not really good in computer and you don't know how to use the computer, you say technologically challenged. Instead of saying short person, you say vertically challenged. Instead of saying blind, you say visually challenged. In other words, in this topic, this will allow us to really improve our horizon, our dimension in understanding others, especially when we communicate with them. Local and global communication in multicultural setting is essential for us to learn in purposive communication because we are not just more on the structure of the language, but the way how we use the language in the context. So here we are dealing on the diversity of our culture, the world as world diversity, wherein we are not just living on our own. If we want to improve and develop our culture, we need to bridge the gap with others. And number two, we are living in a global community where the use of technology, the superhighway of information, and the use of optical fiber, we can actually call to each other to the internet, so we are part of it. Number three, we need to become a gender sensitive in terms of the use of our language. So him or her, his or her. So those are the things that to use neutral words. And we have also to become a to use less offensive words we call political correctness, saying things indirectly not to offend other people. And we have also the gender awareness and gender sensitivity. So those are the things that we do not impose that others are less, and because we see that our culture is more. So I hope that will give you the enlightenment about this topic in lesson 3. If you have any question regarding this video, please comment down and type your concerns about this. So hope to see you in lesson 4. See you and God bless. Love you.